on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios.
Insert Democrat socialist here.
Runs the Democratic House floor for 30 plus years running. He's promising this and he's stealing that. Where can you get that kind of money? He's using your house like his own piggy bank. You ought to know by now. You can pay off your house here in Illinois, but you can never keep up with the taxes. Oh, how it's always been the plan to have a taxpayer pay, no doubt. Not a matter of if anymore, but when you're moving out. I said when you're moving
Top
out.
of the morning, Dan and Amy. That theme music means it's time for our weekly conversation with Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoints, wirepoints.org, all things Illinois policy related. The Department of Education, potentially on the Doge chopping block, hope so. Randy Weingarten, the obnoxious, shrew impersonating president of the American Federation of Teachers.
She screams when she talks, by the way. She doesn't talk.
She had this to say about the Department of Education on MSNBC over the weekend. Interesting.
One more point, which is, Senator Round's bill. This is what we're worried about. My members don't really care about whether they have a bureaucracy of the Department of Education or not. In fact, Al Shanker and the AFT in the 1970s were opposed to its creation.
Oh.
Al Shanker famously credited for the statement that when the kids start paying union dues, I'll start representing the kids, which is basically the honest philosophy of these teachers' unions. But anyway, yeah, so he's talking about Senator Mike Rounds from South Dakota, his bill to eliminate the Department of Education. Linda McMahon been nominated to be the Secretary of Education. So maybe we could get some bipartisan agreement on eliminating the Department of Education. The trick is what the unions will want in return.
Right.
They don't want the $100 billion to go away. They just want it directly drop shipped to the government school systems, whereas somebody like me, for example, might say, I want it drop shipped to families in the poorest performing, pick a percentage, 20%, 30%, 50% of government school systems in the country, and let them take those dollars and send their kids to whatever school is the best fit for their kids. So I'm not sure we're completely aligned here, but I mean the idea of getting some union buy-in and eliminating a federal bureaucracy, that's rather novel. Ted, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. Good morning, Amy.
How about that? Maybe we could get Randy to talk to the bosses over at CTU and IFT and IEA and get some Illinois buy-in on this.
Well, it'd be nice, I tell you, but we better negotiate for even more, right? I like the idea of voucherizing in some way all that money, but you better talk further about how we get some more concessions on all the DEI stuff that's going on too, because that's a big part of it. But I'm excited by Linda McMahon. If they want to get rid of DOE is great, and if they want to keep localizing education, I'm not a big fan of trying to do all that stuff in the federal government level, because it's just not, one, it's not the role of government, and two, they make a bigger mess, as we know from all these different titles. Of course, helping the poor makes sense, but at the same time, they help make a disaster of education as we know it.
Well, speaking of a disaster of education and CTU, let's talk about CPS, since they're potentially on the brink of another strike in the next 60 or 90 days. The study that you and your colleague John Klingner did over at wirepoints.org about the spend at CPS too. It's not just the $30,000 per kid spend; it's how it's spent and how is it spent.
Well, only half of it makes it to instruction. So out of the $10 billion, it's $10 billion, $30,000 a kid, and we cut it different ways, looking at what the CPS itself reports, and only half makes it to instruction, only half makes it to what's called the school networks, and the rest is, of course, pensions, massive bureaucracy. This massive increase in hiring that they did. They hired 9,000 new people in the last few years, even as enrollment was shrinking. And So really, it's funny, but you send a lot of money over there, and it goes to debt, it goes to pensions, it goes to all these bureaucracies and whatever you want to call these offices, and it's wasted. And kids can't read, and taxes keep going up. And so it's something that needs to be totally disassembled and re-put together in a totally different way.
That bears repeating.
Yeah, please.
Staffing at CPS, staffing at Chicago schools has increased by 25% since just before the pandemic, 9,000 new employees, while student enrollment declined by 10%.
Yeah, 37,000 fewer.
I mean, and I'm sorry, what's the ask for CTU? What's their proposal? I know it's $50 billion and 3 cents, but I mean, what are the step raises on a 5-year contract?
They want 12%, 13%, something like that raises, which includes the inflation plus their steps. So it's massive. They want 13,000 new employees. So just the 13,000 new employees is going to cost them $5.5 billion, and then the raises and all that would cost another. I forget the numbers, but it's like, in the end, $10 billion is what they want in new spending over 4 years. That's just massive, and it's not doable. It's bankruptcy stuff. So let them do it, and then we'll figure out what we'll do after that, because it's unsustainable.
Oh my God! And then you have them all. I mean, chronic absences. 43% were at least absent, almost half, 10 days in a row.
Yeah, well, not in a row, but just 10
total
days.
10 days.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's the same thing. We've seen it for the kids, and we've seen it for the teachers. And to be fair, it's not just CPS; it's statewide. But COVID kind of just said, "Hey, if you don't want to come in, don't come in." And so you got to think about that. You remember what it's like when a substitute teacher came in; they just turn on a movie, a video, or something, and you don't learn anything. And that's exactly what happens. Not only are they not learning during the normal days, but when the teachers are out that much, learning goes down even more.
If there was ever an opportunity to stand up a Doge at the state level, right?
Wow.
I mean, even in a shadow voluntary type of deal, I mean, essentially you at Wirepoints sort of serve as that, but it'd be nice to get some political leadership, in quotation marks, to do something like that, to put a spotlight on this on a standardized basis, but I guess that's just too big an ask of the Republican Party.
Yeah, hopefully it'll happen. I tell you, that's one of the nice things about Doge being created at the national level, is that it provides a framework for how we might look at a place like Illinois, because, obviously the federal government has its share of all that duplicity, but, we're even worse, I think, given where we are. So it'll be a big opportunity if we can ever figure out how to get something like that established.
Yeah. Speaking of Chicago and the need for Doge oversight, the Chicago pension debt, I know we've talked about this last week. We've talked about this for, 15 years, that this just doesn't register, just does not penetrate the consciousness of the Chicago or the Chicagoland electorate. But what's the status of Chicago's pension funds during these heady times where we see the Dow approaching 45,000 and, market returns? And even if you were investing in risky assets like crypto, you'd be seeing exponential returns. So these are good economic times in terms of the traditional investment vehicles. And where do we find these shitty pension systems?
Oh my gosh, they're at the bottom of the barrel nationally. I mean, these city pensions are, I would be. We talk about it a lot. We've warned about it a lot. But if you're a Chicago police or a Chicago fire, or a Chicago municipal worker, I mean, the chances, especially if you're a younger one, or if you are you still got to walk to retirement. In theory, there won't be any money there. They are so poorly funded, very little money. And what's fascinating, we just put out a report this morning, and we looked at let's look at the last decade. We put in massive amounts of new money into the pension plans based on new requirements. $20 billion has gone into the pension funds, and instead of things getting better, instead of the debts of the city of Chicago going down, they actually went up by $24 billion. So it's been like we're just putting money into a black hole, and it doesn't help. And the retirement security workers has also gotten worse. So it just shows you how bastardized these systems have become. They're just not reformable. That's why you need that constitutional amendment. And really, what you need is we need to bring back the possibility of municipal bankruptcy. Nobody's talking about that anymore. But the real way for Chicago to get out of this is to do a proper bankruptcy proceeding and reorganize its debts, because it's got more than it can handle.
Combined, the 5 city pension funds, police, fire, muni, laborers, teachers, 30% funded. Combined.
How is that sustainable?
Police and fire and muni all under 25% funded. It's a death spiral. And the point that you've made for many years is that you say, oh, well, and you're speaking to this now with the increase in funding as compared to the previous decade, a 4x increase in funding, and yet you're still losing ground. It's not just, oh, you got to put more money in it and they skip payments and this and that. That's all true. They skip payments. But meanwhile, while they were skipping payments, they were also enhancing the benefits. And we know what's happened with these contracts. So you cannot, this is the thing that the government unions don't want to confront. You cannot finance the obligations that you have imposed. You just can't make it make sense without, basically all but liquidating the private sector. And that's just something they don't want to confront. It's always that crutch about politicians stole and politicians didn't act responsibly. That's all true. But even if they hadn't, as long as you're spiking these benefit levels to unsustainable heights as compared to the people, the middle income families that are financing it all, you can't make the math work.
No, and even if you could make the math work over the next 30 years, the destruction we're going to see in Chicago with the tax hikes, to pay all that debt, you're going to have massive tax hikes.
Yeah, well, right.
Just keep bleeding. We'll just keep bleeding people, businesses. And so 30 years from now, even if we survived it, we'd be like this shrunken self of a Chicago. God knows how much more crime-ridden it would be, and people flee. So you have to fix the problem. And that's the sad part about all this, is that nobody thinks about fixing the problem anymore. Everybody's all, I critique people all the time now. They've all become incrementalist. If we can just make this small change, if we can make this improvement, that kind of stuff. I'm like, no, because we don't have time for that.
Police pension fund is 22% funded. What if the Dow comes off 20%? Which is possible. Very possible. Yeah. And in fact, it's cyclical. It's likely at some point in the not too distant future. Where's that going to leave current beneficiaries in the police department, or soon to be beneficiaries? Not in a good position.
Then we go to a pay-as-you-go system where you're just grabbing money from the budget. That means you have to steal it from everything else to pay pensions, because they're first in line. They literally are first in line on spending. So you'd have to cut from schools, you have to cut from police, you cut from everywhere just to pay the pensions. We've seen that happen in East St. Louis. We've seen that happen in Harvey. It's ugly.
Okay, well, again, just putting people on notice. You can choose to maintain your blinders, I suppose. That's probably what will happen, certainly from the political class in this state. Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoints, wirepoints.org, all things Illinois policy related. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Amy Jacobson and Dan Proft here, and we want to tell you about our 2024 Food for the Poor campaign.
If you've listened to the station and to our show for any length of time, then you already know about Food for the Poor. They're a nonprofit, faith-based organization that provides food, water, medicine, clothing, and life-saving supplies directly to local partners in Latin America and the Caribbean.
We all know how bad the situation is right now in Latin America and the Caribbean.
For many families, the cost of food has simply become prohibitive, leading to sickness and starvation.
The only thing standing between these families and starvation is Food for the Poor. But in order to get this food to those who need it most, Food for the Poor needs your help. Your one-time gift of just $50 can provide life-saving food for a child for an entire